Okay, so we're going to do question and answer, my favorite class, because I find that I can give a really decent talk for about 5 minutes, and then I start repeating myself and like talking around in circles and stuff. So I'm going to give you a great 5-minute answer to whatever your question is. And I invite you tonight to think about it in terms of, like, ask me whatever you've been thinking about, but also think about it from this way. What have I never asked about, or what have I never really thought about in terms of my practice? So I don't know how much this happens to you guys, but for me, since martial arts is my life is a little bit weird. And so when I go out into the world and I encounter things and I see something that kind of like jogs in my mind that there would, like, that's an interesting thing. How would I relate that to martial arts? Or that's like an interesting lesson. How does that relate to my experience in martial arts? Everything becomes something about martial arts. I see like the whole world and everything that happens to me through this lens of practice. And I understand that that's not how most people think. So you might have something that you're dealing with that you think that has nothing to do with martial arts at all. I promise you, for me, it has everything to do with martial arts and meditation and practice. So try me. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
How does love come into our way of meditating?
How does love come into our way of meditating? You asking me this because of our question of the week?
No.
Isn't that our question of the week? It is said that when we meditate, the goal is to clear your mind and open your heart. There's the question. That wasn't why?
No.
Is there some other reason why you want to know the answer to that I have?
I've been thinking about the 5-day retreat, summer retreat that I went to.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I want to look into while I'm on my 5-day retreat.
Got it. Well, I've thought off and on about this for many years since I started meditating. And first of all, when I refer to meditation, I usually refer to it in the bare bones, simplest form of sit and breathe, and use the breath as an anchor to clear the mind and to let all the other thoughts go, and use that as a method of experiencing what is beyond the ego and what is beyond the small self. And of course there is deeper concentration, focus, there's calm, there's peace, there's all of this. And there is another component that comes into play with it, and this idea of love, or of opening your heart, or of compassion certainly is a huge component of meditation. And it is, even if you do it in the very bare bones way that I usually refer to it. Because if you think about it, like, love, my understanding of love, which is only of my years on this planet, and my, trial and error. But love, in the way that I would understand it, in some way, on some level, is like getting beyond the ego. I saw this video of Tony Robbins, who I think is sometimes great, who said that a way to have a great relationship is to get beyond the self, is to stop worrying about yourself. Don't make it about you. And meditation, on a surface level, is very much about me. It's like I'm trying to get calm, I'm trying to get more peace, I'm trying to control my thoughts and discipline my mind and my emotions and all of that. But when you get deeper, it is really about getting beyond yourself. It is really about destruction of the ego. And the ego is what gets in the way of love. The ego is the thing that says, I'm separate from you. I'm separate from you. I'm separate from you. And that is what gives us this false experience of life and of other people. And if you can really through meditation, gain a better understanding on a really deep level of how connected we really are, and how there is in fact no actual separation between us or between anything in the universe. Then that is going to help us get to deeper places in love in our relationships. But then there's also like a more focused way of thinking of this, or a more specific way of meditating, like compassion meditation or meditating on empathy. And there are many different techniques that help with this. One technique is this idea of I sit, and instead of trying to completely clear my mind, or maybe in conjunction with that, I picture somebody, right? I just place somebody in my mind who I love, who I'm very close with, who I have a great relationship with, who matters to me. And I feel what that's like. And then I expand that feeling to the next degree out. So maybe I start with my family, I start with somebody I'm in a relationship with, and then I expand it to the next circle out. My bigger group of friends, my extended family, my students at the dojo, and then expand that out a little bit further. And I try to get this same feeling as I have in my mind, everybody who lives in Los Angeles, and then expand it out, everybody in the country, everybody on the planet, and then, aliens and whatever. But this expanding circle of compassion and of empathy. And they've done amazing studies, with monks who practice this type of meditation, and they've seen that their brains actually undergo a physical transformation. They have more dense gray matter. Their brain is actually formed differently after all these years in the region that processes empathy. So it is something that is like scientifically proven to make you happier, to make you more empathetic, to give you more compassion, to help with love. So I would say anytime you meditate, anytime you can break down the barriers, anytime you can get beyond the ego is very helpful. And then also on maybe a more immediate, possibly more practical level, doing a compassion or empathy meditation, where you're really with deep concentration and deep love, and really feeling that, expanding that circle out, or maybe even choose one person who's really just pissing you off right now and get it for them. And it's a little bit easier when you're sitting and meditating than it is when you're actually like butting heads with that person. And then also recognize, if you have somebody that you're really at odds with in that moment, and you place them in your thoughts, and then you start to get all riled up, and you're like starting to get tense, and you can feel your breath speed up, that's the sign that you got some work to do. I know sometimes when I sit and meditate, I'll think. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll think. Sometimes my thoughts go to crazy places. Like I'll have a thought about, oh man, what if I was defending myself and somebody threw this technique, and I would get like, my body starts to get in more the state of like almost getting adrenalized. So we want to recognize that and let it go. Other question? Yes, ma'am.
So I know you've talked about martial arts in progress being like it goes in overall in that direction, but there's like the ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
When life really gets in the way of your practice, and maybe for an extended period of time, I think this is a question about ego too. And you're being as a martial artist is part of your ego, and you feel like you're losing that. How do you kind of resolve that?
So you feel like you're losing. So the question is, life. I don't know what this pertains to your actual question, but this idea of life and practice having a general upward trend, although sometimes it seems disjointed, or your experience of it is like this. And you say when life gets in the way, what was the rest of it?
So when you're in one of these little dips,
Yeah, you're down here.
and it
Life is in the way.
It's compromising you feeling like a martial artist.
Hmm.
And you recognize that's part of your ego. Is it wrong to feel that way, or is it you shouldn't feel that way because you're in one of these dips, or?
You're saying you feel like you're not a martial artist in that moment? Is that wrong? Yes. Something's wrong with you, Rob. No. So the question is, when I'm like this and I'm not feeling like a martial artist, your question is really like, how do I stop feeling that way?
Yeah.
You don't just want to know if that's wrong or not. You want to know, how can I get here, or how can I at least, manage it. Yeah, manage the dip, or like get beyond this feeling of like I'm not heading in the direction that I want to be heading, or I'm not making the progress. So the first way, what's the first way of becoming great at martial arts? Patience. So first, you know that it goes like this. It's never actually going to go like this, and then you just, maybe when you die, but it's going to come back up like this. And so this too shall pass. So that's one way to deal with it, is just to keep going, and it will eventually, you'll get out of it. But that's too easy of an answer. So look at it this way. First of all, you're not wrong. And there's this saying, what we resist persists. And it's like what you fight against is, at least in your experience of it, going to seem like worse, and it's going to seem prolonged. And you really want to accept exactly where you're at, exactly what your circumstances are, and exactly who you're being in those circumstances. And then you can move on from there. If you're like this and you're making yourself wrong for being like this, it's going to keep going. And your experience of it is going to be way worse than it could be otherwise. So recognize that it goes like this because this is the way that the universe and life and humanity is designed, and you will never actually escape this until you're enlightened. So until you're enlightened, you're like this, just say, oh, I'm like this. And then when you're like this, say, oh, I'm like this. So, accept it, and you're absolutely right. That is the ego, and your ego is what is experiencing this. If you're ever actually able to get beyond the ego experiencing this doesn't affect you at all. You can step back and you're like, oh, that's my ego experiencing that. That's kind of silly. Because the bigger picture is like that. But I'm not even going to answer it really fully from that angle either. I'm going to look at it from the standpoint of a martial artist is one who finds themselves in this situation and deals. So being a martial artist does not mean that you don't do this. Being a martial artist means that you do this, and you have the patience, you have the perseverance, you have the acceptance, you have the wherewithal to deal with it where you are, and then to get beyond. It's like part and parcel of who we are and what we do. There is nobody in the history of martial arts who's just started and it's just been like, this is incredible, I'm so good, and I just keep getting better and better. And then one day you just become enlightened and you beyond the ego, and that's it, and that's the end of life. It's never happened to anybody, never will. In fact, you would not really get anything out of it if this never happened. This is the journey, and this is this is what makes you a martial artist, is having to deal with it. So don't ever expect it to not have the ups and downs. And when you find yourself in the trough, you just can say to yourself, I know this too shall pass, but you can also look at it as an opportunity. And you can say to yourself, ooh, this is good. This is some really, you've heard the saying, the universe only throws at you what you can handle. Like, the universe must think that I am awesome because it's throwing so much crap at me right now. And yeah, stuff keeps getting in the way of my practice, and this person's telling me I can't go, and work is happening, and all this in my regular schedule because I used to come 5 or 6 days a week, and for some reason that's not sustainable, Robin. And so, like, this is just the way that it's going to go. So it's also like this chapter in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, where he talks about your mind weeds. You heard me talk about this. When you sit and meditate and you have like a hard time meditating, or you have a thought that persists, or you have a whatever, you don't look at it as like, oh, this is terrible. This is such an awful thing that's happening to me right now. You dig up the mind weed and you bury it, and it gives you nourishment. And he uses the example of gardening. If you dig up a weed and bury it, and the compost will help the other plants grow. That is really the way to look at it. And it's, on one hand it might seem like just like positive thinking and just be happy, even though it's not that. It's just reality. It's just knowing that this is going to happen. And it is really saying to myself, I know that I can handle this in two different ways. One is to continue to get beat down by it, and the other is to just use this as an opportunity to grow and get stronger from it. So, and there's none of that that's really just going to say like, oh, in a flash it's all fixed and now I feel great about it. It's the process. That is practice. I'm sure it helps a little bit for you to know that I go through the same thing and everybody goes through the same thing, but to some extent it is still just what you deal with. It is your life and it is your practice. So when you're down there, that's just it. And when you're up here, that's it. That's the yin and the yang. This can't exist without the other. So deal with it. Other question? No other questions? Yes, ma'am, AJ.
I've got a couple, but I'm trying to figure out
Choose the best one.
the best one.
The one that's just going to send us all over the top.
The first one was more about I've had trouble with my sleep pattern not being consistent and very good. So if I'm going to meditate, what would be the best way of going about that to help me sleep better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're in a tricky subject here. The relationship between sleep and meditation, because you sleep. You need sleep, or your meditation is going to be awful. And meditating can help you sleep better. And if you only meditate right before you go to bed, and you use it to kind of get sleepy, then you are in a real rough situation where now every time I sit to meditate, I start to fall asleep. And I can only tell you about this because of my own personal experience, my deep personal experience with the sleepitation. So you gotta listen to your body and be consistent. And consistency with sleep is not just I sleep 8 hours a day. It's like I sleep the same time each night, and this is tough, especially when you got a kid, because your life is not your own. But it's better to sleep 6 hours consistently at the same time than it is to sleep 6 hours one night and 9 hours the next night, because your body's like, I don't know what's going on right now, and it gets into this rhythm. And meditation will be best if you are in the rhythm and you're having it work for you rather than against you. So beyond just like the traditional understanding of I'm going to try to sleep regularly and as well as I can, with meditation, you do want to meditate, not only when you're tired, and not only when you're trying to make yourself tired. Although meditation right before you go to bed is good, and it can help you sleep much better. But I wouldn't go into it with the intention of I'm going to meditate in order to make myself tired. I would go into it with the intention of I'm going to meditate to in a very focused way clear my mind. And really, I mean, in a literal sense, I go from a million thoughts to very few thoughts. To just one or two thoughts or just focusing on the breath, and that's it. And if I can go from here to here, and then stop that, and then go to bed, and make it a separate process, then that'll work really well. But in my experience, like for a while, I just meditated right before bed, and I would get sleepy when I meditated. And sometimes it would be an hour-long meditation. When I am going to bed, that is not an easy thing to do. My meditations turned into garbage some of those nights. And I did it, but it was not a good meditation. So you want to also experiment with meditating other times of the day. And I will say that even meditating in the morning will kind of refresh you for the day, even if you didn't sleep as well. Meditating in the afternoon will help you, calm and clear your mind in the middle of the day when everything's, hitting the fan. And clearing your mind on a more regular basis, even throughout the day, will help you go to sleep better. It's really what we're talking about is if you let your mind go unchecked, it's just going to keep piling on more stuff. And you've got songs that you're singing to yourself in your head and all this to-do lists and that, thing you're holding on to from yesterday or from last year. And all of that stuff builds up and you just got to clear it out. Clear it out as many times as you can throughout the day. Even if it's just, a short breathing exercise, and just use as an opportunity to clear the cache. But as long as you are being like really intentional about your meditation, and you sit before you go to bed with the intention of clearing your mind and make it a focused calm, not just a deadening of the mind and thoughts and just letting yourself get sleepy and tired, then it'll work really, really well for you. You do that any time of day, it'll work great, and you will sleep better. But consistency is key. Consistency with meditation, consistency with sleep. Even if you're meditating for 5 or 10 minutes, it's going to make a big difference. So, I don't know if you're going to go to bed right after this class or not, but we're going to meditate right now. Sit.